Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Minutes away from 8 right now, and as we do, as I say all the time, Sticky Beak, like to know what's going on, and particularly around the Dubbo area. Mayor Matthew Dickerson, good morning, sir.
I feel special now. You're not just a sticky beak around everywhere. You particularly like the Dubbo area. I like that.
It's a great area, you know. I mean, you've got the zoo, all the attractions. You've got a jail, which of course, obviously, people like you don't go into because they might lock the door behind you or something like that. It is really good. Now, Oz Day, how did it all go?
Well, despite the bit of controversy around Australia Day, the Earth didn't stop spinning. The sun still came up in the morning. We had a twilight ceremony in Wellington. Now, some people weren't very happy with council for making this decision. We did it as a trial, as a one-year trial, to see how we'd go with the twilight event. We wanted to do it in Dubbo and Wellington, but we weren't allowed to do it in Dubbo because the Australian Citizenship Code says if you do more than 25 citizenships throughout the year, you have to have an event on Australia Day. So we were a bit stymied there, but the Wellington event went really well. We had markets there. The formal ceremony started at 5:30. We had the various speakers. We had awards given out. One of the speakers we've added to both the Dubbo and Wellington ceremonies is not just the mayor or deputy mayor, not just the ambassador, but also an Aboriginal elder giving an address. And in Wellington, we had Uncle Joe Daly give us an address from an Aboriginal perspective. We thought that was relevant with 60,000 years of history with Aboriginals in this nation. So it all seemed to go very well in Wellington. And the time of day, probably the only comment I'd have is that we started at 5:30. By 6 o'clock, I reckon the weather was just about perfect. So maybe next year we'll go out and survey the community and see what they want. But if we ran it as a twilight event again, I reckon about 6 o'clock would probably be about spot on to start the event and going through to about 7 o'clock. And then the markets continued afterwards. We probably had 400 people down around Wellington. So that was fantastic. Dubbo we had the next morning on the actual Australia Day on the Thursday. And we started that at 8:30 trying to beat the heat, but it was still pretty hot. We had David Hall, the Paralympic tennis champion, a wheelchair tennis champion, there as our ambassador. We had Lewis Burns give our Aboriginal elder address, and again lots of Australia Day awards given out, plus 49 new citizens we made on the day.
Absolutely amazing stuff, isn't it? Now listen, the other thing they're talking about, like Dubbo and this doesn't go together. Sand, you're talking about sand. What's this about?
Well, it's one of the things that people often say to me, I say, what have you got in Sydney that we haven't got in Dubbo? And they say the beach. And I say, well, we've got Sandy Beach. And I understand it's not quite as good for surfing at Sandy Beach as maybe at Bondi, but we've got Sandy Beach. But with all the rain we've had, we've had the river being up from about July to December last year. One of our pedestrian bridges was closed for that entire time. And you can imagine with the river being up at those levels for that period of time, when the river finally went down, Sandy Beach was sandier Sandy Beach. That had more sand than we'd ever seen before on Sandy Beach. Now we went then and actually trying to help out some of our citizens for that recreation area, move some of that sand around because we wanted to allow a path for people to be able to get their canoes down, the Dragon Boat Club, all sorts of recreational users down to the river. But New South Wales Fisheries said, hold on a second, you've moved some of that sand around. By our definition, not by the common man definition, but by the New South Wales Fisheries definition, then you've been dredging a waterway. And so we had some discussions with New South Wales Fisheries, but what we've now got to do is we've got to move the sand back to how it was. We've got to submit a plan to New South Wales Fisheries to move the sand around again to make it safer, and then we'll move the sand again. So it sounds like a lot of movement of sand that's going to happen down there.
Tell me about pumped hydro.
Well, this is pretty exciting as well. As you're well and truly aware from previous discussions we've had, we are right in the middle of the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone. So we've got lots of wind turbines and solar farms and batteries going up. Another organisation has decided that this is the perfect location near Burrendong Dam to put a pumped hydro scheme in. They're not actually going to use the water in the dam per se. They're going to build two separate reservoirs, 350 metres elevation between the two, and they go about 15 gigalitres of water there, and they're going to basically have the ability to produce 800 megawatts of power over a 12-hour period. Now, when I say produce, you're not actually producing power in a pumped hydro scheme. It's a big battery. So when we've got too much power from the wind turbines or too much power from the solar farms, that's going to pump water back up into the upper reservoir. And then when you need that power, say for example middle of the night when the sun's not shining, that water can drop down. It's a hydroelectric scheme effectively and produce that 800 megawatts of power for that 12-hour time frame. So pretty exciting to see more projects around here. That'll be a big construction project, huge construction project. Again, in terms of ongoing employment, probably not a huge amount of ongoing employment, but I'm pretty excited about this whole area, the amount of power we'll be providing for the entire state. It's not that far away from us producing about 30% of the power that the homes need across the state from this little area, this little renewable energy zone we've got going here.
Okay, now I've got to move on. Sorry, just quickly, the live traffic app, what's happening there?
So we've got a trial that we're just starting where all of our data for any traffic changes, and this obviously was relevant during the floods, any traffic changes we were putting on our website. People were travelling, they had to check our website, other councils' websites, plus live traffic. So last week we started a trial where all of our data just goes straight into live traffic. You won't need to check our website anymore, check live traffic, and anything in our local government area will automatically be on there. And presumably as that goes forward, you'll have other local government areas doing the same thing, so it'll be much easier for travellers.
Good on you, sir. Thank you once again for your time, and we will catch up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you. There we go. Matthew Dickinson.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.